Feinberg show, and we're here high in the hills of Berkeley, California, and I'm joined by really a cosmic person and a dear friend of the program. As you can just see, an amazing bass player, David Margen. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg show.
Hey Jake, how you guys doing?
People were loving
Put
that.
this down for a sec.
Yeah, please. I mean, people want you to keep playing, but that was heavy stuff. You know,
It's a groove thing.
I wanted to ask you, when I interviewed Peter Margen, your brother, he talked about the first experience that he had with black music was at a Quaker church that your parents used to take him to. We saw Leadbelly there, and I'm thinking, I was like, maybe Dave was too young to go, but I mean, if that wasn't the first time, when were you exposed to black music?
Probably when I was 13 or 14. I was playing with a band called Tuwaka with Peter and my brothers, and Johnny Otis was in the band, and that's kind of when I started listening to James Brown and funk. And then by the time I was 13 and 14, I had been kind of taken under the wing by this bass player named John Knight, who was a big influence on me. He was actually, I think, if he would have not died of a heroin overdose when I think I was 15 or so, he probably would have ended up playing with Tower after Rocco left at that point.
John Knight.
Yep. But they used to sneak me into the On Broadway when I was 13 or 14. I would put a fake mustache on and a hat and try and look mature, and they would sneak me in to see Tower of Power when Tower was just first starting out. This would have been probably 71 or 72, and On Broadway was where they had, I think they played every Monday night. And
it was also a major haven for like the jam sessions, like Victor Pantoa would be down there.
Yeah, it was definitely a scene, and it was a lot of fun. It was actually before even Lenny Pickett was in the band. It was really at kind of the beginning stages of it, just when they changed.
Was it Willie Fulton was in the band, or
yeah, Willie was in the band.
Willie was in the band.
That was before Bruce Conti even started playing with them. So I was kind of known as the young funky man, I guess, at that point. I was way young.
Well, no, what I wanted you to talk about was the oral tradition of black music. I mean, when I saw Billy Cobham, Ron Carter, and Kenny Barron last summer at the Art of the Rhythm section, there were all these texts running around saying, Kenny, is your amp up? Can you hear okay? Ron, can you hear that all right? Billy, they're all talking, right? And these cats just start playing. And within 2 minutes, everybody left the bandstand. They just went away. Can you talk about what was most impactful about soul music, black music to you? Especially the nonverbal part of it, how you communicated.
Because it's not about the time signature, it's not about what's written out necessarily, it's a feel thing. And I'm not saying that a lot of early black music in the R&B set didn't. I mean, the old Motown arrangers, I think, would write out the bass lines, and then from there, Jameson and Weber would extrapolate and put in more stuff. In fact, I've been listening to some, with the new technology now, they can actually, cut all the other instruments. You can just hear like the bass by itself. I mean, the creativity and the feel thing is just, it's monstrous.
You can lower everybody else and just hear Jamerson.
Yep. So as far as, black music, I mean, well, it goes so far back. I mean, it's really, I think I owe a hell of a lot to black musicians for coming up with what they came up with at the time, and being a white guy trying to emulate it since I was 13 years old and I'm now 60. It definitely, and for me, just coming up, I think we talked about this in an earlier interview, coming up, and my first real education was playing in a black soul club in East Oakland when I was 14 years old.
Whispering Shadows.
It was actually, this was before. This was a singer named Richard Dimples Fields.
Yes, yes.
And it was crazy, man.
I want to hear.
Check this out. So he put this club together like at this big building at the corner of East 14th, which is now International Boulevard, and High Street. And this was like, that was the hood. And now it's more Hispanic, but back then that was the hood. And so we used to play. He would have this podium in the middle of the club with one little monitor, and he would sing in the middle of this place, and we were set up on the side of the club. But that was my first gig actually playing solo music with cats that were much older than myself, and actually doing that gig. It was.
Explain why he had the podium in the middle. Was he announced? He's like, Dave Margen on. I mean,
no, he would sing all night from there.
He would sing from the podium.
Sing the whole night from in this podium in the middle of the club, and we would be off on the side, the other side of the club, and it was crazy. In fact, I know you just interviewed Ray Obioto recently, but
my man,
we were sitting around talking, and I don't know how it came up where Ray said, "You remember? Did you ever go to this place in Oakland where the singer sang on a piano?" I said, "Man, I used to play there. I think I played there before Ray did." And
wow, but you were younger than Ray.
Yeah, Ray's I think 5 years old.
I love
think something like that. In fact, another one. This was crazy, man. I remember I was playing with Ray. We were backing up this old soul singing group called the Ballads from Oakland. Now, back then there were the Ballads, there were the Whispers, and the Natural Four, and that was kind of...
The Natural Four came out of here?
Yeah,
wow.
yeah, Oakland.
The Ballads.
And so I just remember this was like, 74, maybe 75. So we're at rehearsal, and we're rehearsing, I don't know, someplace in East Oakland. And they said, "We have to stop the rehearsal now." We go, "Why?" They go, "We got to go check on our hose." And I was... They were serious.
Right.
This was back. They were all pimps. This was back like, MacArthur Boulevard and San Pablo Avenue was just packed with prostitutes back then.
I mean,
and so it was like, "Now we got to stop the road. We got to go check on our hose. Be back in about an hour." I mean, so that was some of the crazy stuff that happened back then that I look back on now. I mean, I remember another time I was playing with the Ballads at this place called the Seashell Lounge in Richmond, California, on Hoffman Boulevard, and this was before they even had the freeway out there. You have to go up and down Cutting Boulevard, which was pretty dicey, coming from Marin County, you know, Yupville to back to Oakland.
Real
Berkeley.
dicey.
Yeah. But so we were playing in this club. I remember that they decided they wanted to go after hours, and so I said, "No, I mean, you guys are only paying me, you know, play till 1:30. I'm out of here." I said, "What'd you say?" I said, "You know, come with us." They took me to the back office. Comes out.
You're gonna play, Margen.
I said, "No problem. I'll play till 4." Jeez, I mean.
But I mean, you know, Gary Bartz. When I talked to him, he said Coltrane and Miles never had sheet music on the bandstand. Okay, and if he sees that, it's a jam, it's a rehearsal, it's not a show. Those cats in those clubs, Dimple Fields, Kickin' Curtis Moore,
Yep.
whoever it is, you weren't. Can you talk about the idea of how you got comfortable playing? I'm not saying you. I mean, you idolize Jamerson, but playing loose within the time structure and without relying on sheet music.
It's something that how do I put this? You have to do it, because if you don't, you're probably out of there, or everybody else on the bandstand is looking at you like, what's your problem? And for me, I enjoy playing more not having charts in front of me. I always have, because you can get deeper into the music is the way that I look at it. There's a lot of guys that just want to have paper in front of them and it keeps them comfortable,
Right.
Which I totally respect too.
But then that can become your entire musical life, is just being comfortable, and the idea of pushing yourself outside of that.
Yeah, I mean, you push yourself outside when you going down here and you're up here, but it kind of, you stop thinking about it. Man, what's the mode that I'm playing over this, or what am I doing here? It's more playing feel and playing from the heart, and not necessarily relying on the paper in front of you. And I think a lot of the younger guys now probably are playing more without paper, from what I can tell.
No, they're playing with iPads.
Oh yeah, I've seen.
I mean,
that.
I see,
Yeah,
and that's the thing. I mean, how did you? That's the question.
No, I see that. I see guys
Right.
showing up at gigs all the time with iPads, and that's what they're playing. What they're playing from me. And you know, if you're doing,
It's a little reminder or something. That's
but
okay.
if you're doing a bunch of different gigs with a bunch of different bands, then you need that. I mean, because trying to remember all that stuff would drive you nuts. You know, especially for making $100, $200 on a club gig to try and remember everything before you show up. I mean, so I'm not saying that I don't use paper sometimes, but because I definitely do. But I think that, you know, as things, you know, when training came in and things got a little different at that point, I think that things started, you know, Miles, when he telling everybody, you know, no paper on stage.
Right. Or just turning his back on people when
Yeah.
they're like, "What do you want me to play?" You
Right,
know? Just
right.
play what you want. Play
Right,
what you feel.
Right, exactly. Though I know, like, you know, when Marcus Miller started producing Miles, and you know, they had paper in the studio, no question.
Well, the studio is very different. I'm just talking about on the like a
On the
live
bandstand, yeah,
performance.
yeah,
You know.
Yeah. I mean, now, I mean, even now, I mean, so many singers that are older have teleprompters in front of them and remember the lyrics. I mean, that's pretty standard with a lot of rock bands and pop bands on tour now, I think, to have a teleprompter. The crowd can't see it, but they need a reminder of the lyrics. You know? So that's kind of my feeling on paper at this point.
How did you grow as a musician once your rudiment? And you have to have your rudiments. I'm not trying to say that.
No, you have to.
But I'm saying, how did you grow? How were you able to stretch vocabulary as part of the rhythm section when you were able to just play from your heart and not your head?
It's something I'm still working on, because the head can sometimes get in the way of what you're trying to play.
Yeah.
You know, and I was kind of told fairly early on that I can be a more heady player, and so it's something that I've been conscious of, to try and play more with feel than thinking too hard about, you know, is this note right, or what am I doing here, you know. So I think that, and that's guys that can play both off paper and on paper. I mean, those are the guys, man. I mean, guys that I idolize. I mean, Jocko could write and read like crazy, but he never had. I guess when he had his own band, he might have had some paper on the stand, but that was a guy that played from the heart, even though he was super smart about music.
It's just such an honor to talk to David Margen here on the Jake Feinberg Show. How did you develop? This is funny. I was just hanging out with Barry Melton, the Fish, and and legendary. I mean, just playing his ass off last night with Roy Blumenfeld from the Blues Project and David Aguilar. And
where was that?
That was at this was at Sausalito at the Cruising Cafe Club.
Wow.
Some boat out in Sausalito.
Wow.
But you know, truly, Barry came out of the folk scene and then merged it with plugged-in instruments. It was psychedelic rock. And then, you know, obviously Country Joe and the Fish and Jefferson Airplane and the Grateful Dead, they took that folk aesthetic, left the head of the tune, and started to improvise. Some tunes lent themselves more. And so that's jazz in some ways. I mean, there was improvisation to that. But he came out of the folk tradition.
Right.
And when I talked to Pete Escovedo, he was talking about the fact that Francisco Aguabella and Mongo, they loved the coke in him. But Pete was the first one to say, I didn't come from the indigenous roots of those rhythms. I brought the Latin funk from the Bay Area into that. They incorporated that into their duos or in whatever they were playing in. And I just wanted to know, were you steeped? Did you get off on rock and roll, or were you more of an R&B? Where was your foundation at first?
Rock and roll.
It was rock. Was it like Hank Ballard and that wasn't really rock and roll, but
no. I mean, I'm not that old where I would have gotten before Hank Ballard. Come on, man, I'm 60.
Yeah, I don't want to date you too hard. So what was that? What?
But no, I mean, so I remember I started out playing drums, and when I wanted to start playing drums when I was 5, and my parents said no. My mom was a concert pianist. They said, father was a professor. They said, no, you got to learn piano before you can do anything. So I had this piano teacher that would come, and I couldn't stand it. And half the time she would show up, and her breath was just like pure whiskey or whatever. It was like, I was like, oh God. That's another story. I used to end up like going and hiding before she showed up because I was scared of her when I was 6.
I don't blame you, dude. But wino in there.
Oh, man.
God, what a ragtag situation.
But I started playing drums like when I was just 7 or something. So
right.
I mean, so when I was playing drums, it was all Ginger Baker and, you know,
Charlie Watts.
Yeah, I mean, and Blue Chew. I mean, the Who. I mean, it was, and I was totally a rock guy until I picked up the bass, and I started playing bass when I was 11, and I think at very first I was probably, I remembered, it's a good story, I bought my first Fender bass, and I think I got it from this guy that was playing with this band called Clover that turned into Huey Lewis and the News.
Sure.
And I had this great P bass, man, it was beautiful. But then when I saw Jack Bruce had a Gibson bass, which nobody uses. I said, man, I gotta get a Gibson. I sold this thing and bought a Gibson bass when I first started playing, but by the time I was 13, I realized that that's not happening. What's happening is R&B. So that was where I started with the R&B. And as far as where the roots are for me it was that, then it was R&B, and then
Right.
and then when we put together Salsa de Berkeley when I was 15 or 16, the heavy influence then at that point was Latin, but I was coming from this place too of wanting to play Latin but incorporate a lot of funk into it, because at that point, like my favorite player was Rocco Prestia from Tower, big influence on me.
Oh,
And
God bless that cat, man.
yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Yeah.
all the. I mean, he was the merging. So, but like, did Johnny Otis Jr.
Yeah,
have
Johnny,
an impact on?
Oh yeah, Johnny had a big impact.
Jeffrey Greer is on fire. People are on fire, by the way. They're talking about Tuaca, but I mean, Tuaca. You didn't play drums in Tuaca, right? I mean, you were playing
No, I was
bass,
playing bass.
right?
Yeah, I was playing bass.
But Johnny was playing Latin rhythms. You would say in the
Back then,
It was more of a
it was
rock
actually
band.
two drummers in Tuaca. There was a guy named Kim Plainfield who actually
rest in
passed-
peace, dude. I was gonna track that cat down, but
Yeah,
yeah.
he's passed away.
I know,
But,
I know.
Yeah, but so two drummers, Johnny and so. But then Johnny started getting more into Latin, and that's how kind of we put the whole Salsa de Berkeley thing together. And he turned him on, Eddie Palmieri and Red Barreto. I mean, all the cats, Vanilla All Stars, everything that was going on at that point. And so I had a really difficult time learning Latin music at that point, and just learning how to play tumbao.
The one
correctly.
and
And a 2 and 4, which is really what the tumbao is. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and so it was.
Is there any way you could demonstrate that?
Sure, it's just. I mean, the base of.
And where were you at before, and then what did you have to
Well,
learn?
no, I was playing, Rocco, but then 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. So that's, and it's a muffled sound.
Oh.
So that was the
And then having to play that with human beings.
yeah,
I mean, it's,
and figuring out how it syncs in with kunga and timbali, and everything. So that was hard, but it always kind of instilled me with this thing of how to incorporate both Latin and funk into my playing. And I remember even back then, once I started kind of popping a little bit
Yeah.
during playing Latin, people did not like me. I was like, you got to play this stuff pure. And I'm like, well, I'm kind of into doing a little bit more than just playing straight tumbao.
absolutely. Absolutely. That was more of a string based kind of thing.
Yeah, and it was, that was kind of, I guess, the beginning of world beat, if you want to call it a world music, when you're combining different styles.
The Salsa de Berkeley did not have piano, or what was it didn't have a trap set.
The first incarnation didn't have traps, and we had steel drums.
Oh, this is unbelievable.
And
Yeah, there's
Jeff Norell was the main steel drum player. Great guy, great player.
love him. Mark Baum was playing bone.
Yeah. No, he's playing sax. Dan Reagan, who plays with Mark Anthony now for the last 20 years, he was playing bone.
Wow.
So we did that, and then that incarnation broke up, and that was the incarnation that CBS wanted to sign, but we were too young and screwed up to figure out how to even
Too young and dumb.
to even manipulate into a record deal. It was just like we were fighting. And any case, so then
And Armando Peraza would come to the
So we were playing. We were playing at the Reunion, and it was just this club on Union Street in San Francisco, and we used to hold court there, and like 3 nights in a row, probably twice a month, and so that was when we actually incorporated keyboards and guitar into the band and got rid of the steel drums, and we were playing. I don't know if it would work now because we were playing Brazilian, and then salsa, and then some funk, and it was like all night going into different genres, and people used to come down and dance to it. Now, you know, people would want to come see a straight salsa band if they want to go salsa dancing, and not all the different stuff that we brought in all the time. So
and there was so much space in the music too. I mean, it still was danceable music.
it was all danceable music, but it was just it was a wide variety. I mean, we used to start the night coming from the back, playing percussion like a batucada, and marching through, and it was.
You're getting into Bill Summers territory now. He had that band Batucada with Babatunde Lee out here. This is '69, but those rhythms. I mean,
Summers Heat. Bill Summers. Guess who?
he's a dear friend. I
played in Summers Heat for a short time, actually.
Yeah, that's the other thing. I mean, I'm finding out new stuff every day. I'm interviewing Merle Saunders Jr. and he's talking about you playing with Marmaduke and Merle Saunders Jr. in the San Francisco All-Stars. I'm like, Margen was, I mean, you were a man of the people.
Well, I don't know, man. So actually it was funny because I was, from playing with Salsa de Berkeley, I started playing with Pete and Sheila Escovedo. And I did that for probably about 6 months, I think. And then from there, I met Carlos Santana, who came down to the Reunion. And I was a pretty brazen kid back then. I just kind of went up and sat at his table and started talking to him. And
you're still pretty brazen. Dude, I love it, dude. So Carlos was okay. So you sat down and was like,
yeah. But then I started playing with Pete and Sheila and Bill Summers in Summers Heat. When Bill, after his first record came out, he put together a band. It was with myself and Ray Oviedo and I think Julian Priester. I forgot the other percussion player's name. James Levi was playing drums. It was a good band. And
burning.
But I only did like a month or two with them because I got the call from Santana that they were looking for a sub and maybe it might turn into a full-time position, but they wanted me to sub for a couple down on the greens. And I just turned 19 at the time. And that's how I ended my time with Bill Summers. And who took my place actually was Freddie Washington, who's one of the heaviest session cats in LA there is now. He played with Michael Jackson and everybody, and Ready Freddie. And so that was my time with Bill Summers.
I was thinking about this on the way over. A cat that's tuning in right now is Alex Litcherwood, and he said Bubba's in the house. And did you know Alex from the Oblivion Express, or did you first meet him when you joined Santana?
Well, I knew him from the Oblivion Express only when I went to Keystone Berkeley when I was like 15 years old. I think 15 years old or 14 years old.
Right.
And he was playing with the Oblivion Express. And then I remember seeing Alex again when I was about 17. I saw the Average White Band at Berkeley Community Theater. And I remember, for some reason I remember this, that like this little totally hippie looking guy came out and sang and played tambourine. I was like, who is this guy, man? And then 3 years later, Carlos brought him back from Woodstock to audition for Santana. I said, yeah, I remember you.
That's right. He was working with David Sanchez up there.
Oh yeah, what a
tone.
That's one of the greatest records ever put out.
I agree. I still can't get my ears around it.
I mean,
the vocal, it was...
Oh, everything. Yeah, the Alex sang just great on it, but I mean, the arrangements and everything, that was like, when I heard that, I forgot how maybe Narda, I think, might have played it for Carlos, and Carlos played it for us, and we were like, man, this is great. So,
That's exactly how it went down.
You know, so that was when.
I mean, let me ask you though, did you, was Carlos looking for anything? Was he just wanting you to come in and do exactly what the cat before you was doing, or did he want you to bring in that pop? I mean, popping the bass.
When I first came in, it was definitely learn the parts, because I had a week to learn everything for the like day on the green shows, like, you know, hour and a half set or hour set, whatever. So,
Wow.
so no, I stuck pretty close to what they sent me, because I didn't even have time to even think about anything else, except for there was obviously a gig like that, you're not reading charts on stage. So
Thank God.
So.
So how is that? It was basically just a kind of a groove, like Carlos would sort of just like, because like, you know, Gene Page. I mean, this is in the studio, but with like Ed Green, Wilton Felder, David T. Walker, Gene Page would just put up a chord chart and then let them sort of extrapolate. I know that's a studio thing, but I mean, to learn that many songs in a week, how did that? Was Carlos just like, this is the key it's in, and
No, they sent me tapes, man. I would.
It was autodidact.
I would back then. It was just cassette tapes. Put them in the cassette recorder. I mean, I remember I was still playing with Salsa de Berkeley, so like on the breaks, for instance, like at the reunion, I would spend the time in the corner, just a pair of headphones on, trying to listen to this stuff, because I had so little time to try and get it together, and I didn't want to go in and screw it up. And it was so yeah, it was fast learning at that point. You know, as time went on, sure, I got to be able to, you know, in the studios where we would put everything new together, or at rehearsal in the studio, so I had more of a chance to actually develop more of my own style and put my own stuff into it. I think that the Moonfeller stuff I did was the first record I did with them, and I had some of that, but I think the second album, Inner Secrets, I had a chance to actually put a little more of my own styling in, but it would depend on the producer too. I mean, how much leeway or freedom you actually got.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting thing that you just brought up, because I connected with Steve Swallow and done a couple interviews, and at the time he was on a Gary Burton date called Good Vibes. It's like '69, and Chuck Rainey and Bernard.
My favorite.
Right. I mean, and Purdy were on the session, and at the time Joel Dorn was trying. Jazz was fleeting as a popular music. So they were trying to carve out these radio-friendly hits, you know, with a little more funk and a little more rock in it. And Steve brought a tune in. It wasn't his date, but Arif Mardin came in and started to tell Steve how he wanted his tune to sound or to go. Steve got very surly. The date didn't go very well. And, I mean, when you talk about that, the restrictions in this... Without naming names, you felt restricted sometimes. I mean, when you were cutting albums, like you had to do a certain thing,
Absolutely.
And you couldn't stray from that.
Absolutely. And I mean, depending who you're recording with, but I mean, if you're doing, you know, Santana, especially when you're trying to make a pop record, get some hits. I mean, you know, I know enough that. On those tracks, you're not playing all over the place. You're playing what needs to be played, and that's always been my attitude in the studio anyway. You play what you need there. If you start trying to clutter up and put in too many fills and too much crazy stuff, I mean,
it doesn't even fit the music.
If the music calls for
That's
it,
right.
Sure, of course you do it. But to go in when you're working on a rock or pop or something, you know, or even depending who the jazz artist is you're playing with or whatever, I mean, you got to play for the music. That's the thing. You got to play for the music. And if you don't, you probably won't be working much.
You know, when I interviewed Greg Arico, he talked about how you handle fame and success. I mean, it's a big part of it. And I just want you to talk to younger cats about how you've managed it, being at the top. And then the other thing is, like, for me, being on the road and going to see so much live music, now it's all vibrational for me. I just go right to the front row and I just feel it. And I'm saying to myself, how the hell do these cats come down after Transcendent shows? And we can leave everything on the side there, but I'm just talking about how you dealt with success. What is your advice for cats out there who, in today's world, it's a little bit different because, let's face it, there's a lot of pop acts that they can't even perform live because they're not really musicians. But what are the intangibles for survival of success?
It's kind of a hard question.
You're welcome to the Jeff Feinberg show.
Thank you. As far as the pop acts that are out there now, if they didn't have a million programmers and equipment sitting under the stage putting it all out, there would be.
How did I sound? Terrible. We'll fix it. That's the thing, and nobody was saying we'll fix it back then.
We used to fix it, but you used to have to back then in the studio, if you screwed up, you could punch in, and that's how you fix it. Now the computer just takes care of it, so it doesn't matter anymore. But if you were known as a guy that has to punch in too much, you weren't working that much because
that's right. You were fucking up too much. Yeah. Well, no, Dennis Coffey, I just interviewed him. It was required. One session was 3 hours in Motown. They had to do one song an hour.
I saw that. Yeah,
and they had to do it. Yeah. And if you made a mistake, they'd have to do it over again. So there was the focus is what I'm really getting at. It's like that. But let me finish your. As far as young players, you just got to stay grounded.
I don't. And it's about the music. I think the business has changed, man, so much since I was sort of at my heyday. And I don't want to make myself sound old, and I'm not crotchety, at least.
No. You're still playing your ass off.
Yeah. So but back then, man, it was like drugs. I hate to use the phrase drugs, girls, and everything else. It was,
sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
I can't stand that phrase, but unfortunately, it was kind of
apt.
It was very apt for what was happening. But it made it exciting, and when you're playing the same show every night on tour, it's kind of nice to have some other stuff to make it more fun, especially in the States when, the only thing there is to do is go to a mall or possibly a museum, but at least internationally, I always was able to entertain myself outside of sex, drugs, and rock and roll to really learn about the world and other cultures, and Europe, was always a blast.
Can you talk about this recent musical experience in India you had?
Yeah, so I just went to India for vacation, actually, which is something I'm starting to try and do more now in my life, instead of just going to
enjoy your life,
a place and playing there, but actually, so I never actually played in India before, so this friend of mine is a trumpet player here. He had a friend in the very holy city of Varanasi, which is, it's on the Ganges, and that's where
all the people go to die.
Exactly.
Okay.
You know your history.
No, I had a friend who used to walk that path to play tablas, and it was, I know it very well.
Yeah. Okay. So he turned me on to this guy who was a master violinist. He was Dr. Vinjay. I forgot his last name, but so I called him, and I didn't really know what to expect at all, and so I had the front desk of the hotel call to see how to get there, to give the taxi directions, etc. And then he tells the hotel, "This is a very famous musician that you have staying at your hotel tonight, blah, blah, blah." But I thought we were going there for dinner. So we showed up, and we were late. And so it turned out it wasn't for dinner. We sat down in his music studio. And so, I'm like...
You're like hungry.
I didn't even worry about the food.
Right, no, I know. I
was hungry, but it was like, they brought us tea and snacks. And but so, I was kind of like, well, can you tell me I'm really curious, like between cathartic music and classical Indian music, can you kind of tell me some of the rhythms and what the difference? And he just said stop. And the cat he's probably in his mid-60s, the warmest guy I've ever met. And he just said, we're gonna sing and we're gonna clap. So he put on the drone, he had it on
The tambora kind of.
yeah, he had it on tape, like next to him, and the drone and the tambor, and he just started singing.
Ding, 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 like the.
Ding, 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 about all the, and then he would make, and I'm not a singer.
No,
I mean,
no one would mistake you for a singer.
I've had my mic taken away from me before, so believe me, I'm not a great singer. It's another story. But
Wow. So he put you out of your comfort
zone.
zone.
I was having to sing what he was singing and then clap, and this went on for probably an hour and a half, and it was just this transcendence of mind and body going on. And then he said, you do something. So I started, all I could think was like, and started singing bass and clapping and snapping. And he started singing all this crazy stuff over it, all these Indian rhythms, and
On the spot.
on the spot, man. It was incredible. Then he said, very nice, we're done. And we got up and gave me the warmest hug I've ever had from anybody. And he said, if you'd like to come back and study, I'd love to have you come here for a while. And that was it. But it was like one of those musical experiences that they happen so rarely, put it that way. It was just cosmic.
I mean, that's the confounding thing, through all the peaks and valleys of being a musician. Even Dennis, going back to coffee again, he told me, he goes, in Detroit, even today, what is the news about Detroit? It's falling apart. It's dilapidated. And there's truth. There's a lot of truth in that. But he said, any night of the week, you can go and see any music you want. Can you really take the music? So and you can never really take the music out of the city, just like you can't take the spirit out of Cuba. You can't take it. And so for the musician, that's a reinforcement to you when you meet cats like that.
Oh, man.
You can't take it. You can never take it away.
No, and he's living a very simplistic life there. I mean, he's doing probably better than a lot. He had, pretty nice little house, and he performs sometimes, but he's just, you can't take it away. You can't take it away. And it's not about describing anything intellectually between cathartic and whatever, and breaking down, the rhythms, the 9/8 and the 17/9s, or 1911, whatever.
It's just over.
But, I mean, just,
Insane.
Yeah, the rhythms are insane. In fact, there's a video online about the Berkeley School of Music Indian band does this thing, man. It's mind-blowing the way they're singing and playing.
It was under Berkeley in Boston.
Yeah. I mean, I can't even understand it. I mean, it would take me years to sit down and try to count those rhythms and figure them out. I mean, it's just, it's wild.
Can you talk about your relationship with Jeff Tamalier?
Sure.
And the kind of work that you're doing these days, and how you're trying to,
So let's see, Jeff and I go back about 40 years, I think. No.
Is there a light in here, by the way? It's just getting a little bit.
Let me turn up.
Take a break here. The dog is.
That's my dog.
Look at this
That's
dog.
Bootsy.
Bootsy is he is chilling. Or is it a she or he?
Bootsy Collins right there. My last dog was named Jocko, so you figured.
That is perfect. Boots. There's Boots. That is perfect. Yeah. Tamalier, you guys go back a few decades, I guess.
Yeah, like 3 or 4 decades, and so we played together a lot. But we've been collaborating a lot more recently. He's doing a record by a band called Strokeland, which Doc Kuka and from Tower and Jeff wrote most of the material. Alex sings on it too, actually. But we did, I think, 8 tracks in the studio, and I guess it's supposed to come out, I think, next month or the month after. So that's a fun project. Jeff and I have this club gig once a month at a place called Armando's, which is a great club in Martinez.
I still have to get there.
Oh,
I'm going to come out again. It's only once a month?
Yep, and we sell out every time we play there now. It's just standing room only is crazy. And we bring in a different singer every month, so that's a lot of fun. I'm trying to put something together with a drummer named David Perper. We've been talking about.
He's a dear friend. I love the cat so much.
We've been talking about trying to do something. And I'm also playing in a new band called Momo Tumbo, which came out of Malo. I did a couple of gigs with Malo, and there was, I don't know what was going on.
The original Malo, or the?
Yeah, well, at least I don't want to get into too much of it, but the name started kind of. Some of them were trying to take it from somebody else, and I was like, man, I don't need this.
No way.
But so
we don't need another war situation here.
Exactly. So.
It's embarrassing to see those signs.
Oh yeah.
War and there's no Howard Scott, no
Lee Osmond,
Harold Brown. Give me a break.
No, it's crazy.
Yeah,
so
I dig.
So anyway, there's a new band called Momo Tumbo with Gabe Marzo, who was the guitar player in Malo for like 30 or 40 years, and Leo Rosales, and a bunch of other great players. Jorge Santana came down to our last gig and played with us. That was fun.
I'm still looking for Jorge, man. Yeah.
He's around.
I know he's tuning into this right now. You better stop hiding, dude. But no. How often do you think about your parents? Jeffrey Greer, when I interviewed him, he talked about the stroganoff your mom used to make.
And the curry.
And the curry. I guess in the lineage of it all, they're the ones that they started it. The fuel was there, whether or not they stylistically you didn't get off or you did on what they did, but they were the beginnings of the music for the Margen.
They were. I mean, we used to rehearse in one of the bedrooms. We turned into a rehearsal room, and
pandemonium in there.
We would every day after school, we'd go there and play and write and rehearse for 3 hours, playing at number 11 on our dials, just loud, and I'm sure it's probably pretty horrible sounding. I remember I had a bass cabinet that had like a couple of JBL speakers that were just like, it was no, and that was the other. But actually, no. To tell you the truth, man. After a while, we started to get pretty good, and that was Tuwaka, and
oh yeah.
But I think about my parents all the time. My brother and I have been going through some stuff with UC Berkeley because my father was very generous to the school, and that he started something called the Wellness Newsletter, and all the money went back into the school, and he was a pioneer in the word wellness and everything else. And
was he a literary professor? What kind of professor?
He was a professor of nutrition and public health. He was a doctor also, and he ended up having a library named after him, the Public Health Library, and UC Berkeley.
Shit.
And UC Berkeley actually just last year I found out about it inadvertently, and I called them. They're moving the library, and they stripped his name from the library. So we've been working with UC to figure out how to honor him in the new building, and so I've thought about him a lot because we've been fighting the powers there to preserve my dad's legacy.
It's kind of like you have to go in there with his legacy almost and prove that
keeping it alive.
Yeah, I'll do anything I can to make sure that your father's name doesn't ever leave that damn building.
Yeah, it's just so now he has the student services lounge named after him and a plaque in another library.
Not enough.
No, I know, but anyway, so you asked about my parents, so that's been been on the forefront of my mind.
Yeah, I can only hope that's.
Yeah.
It's just the same way Jack Murphy Stadium becomes Petco Park or something. All of a sudden, it's like a corporate.
Yeah, it's corporate crap. Yeah, Yep, and at UC, unfortunately, is who donates the most amount of money, not who's honored for their work and dedication and pioneerism. So yeah.
Well, we've been cooking. You got to pick up a car, but I'm not going to let you go without telling me. You told me the bunkmate story about Billy and you, and waking up one morning and Brent was not into the gig with Kingfish, and he split on the plane, and you're like, "Where the heck is he?" And the door was gone. He was gone. Give me, for the Brent Midland, as his spirit has been in me. I first got into music because of Brent. Ironically, just his voice and his playing. Can you talk about, Brent as a player and he wasn't always the easiest cat to communicate with, but man, on the bandstand, Jerry Cortez said even in practice, it was like he was giving it his all, every last breath.
The guy gave it 24/7.
24/7, and he was a badass.
He was bad. I mean, he was, besides Garcia, he was certainly my favorite member of the Grateful Dead.
Billy, you got to throw Billy in there somewhere.
Yeah, but no disrespect to any other musicians in that organization.
No.
But Brent, man, I mean, the cat had so much soul in his singing, and it was coming. I mean, there was so much feeling to it, and it was probably coming from such a pained place from the way the guy was, and but he was. I mean, man, nights on the bandstand when we would open up and get away, we had parts where it was just, it was open.
Right.
And those moments, man, every night he would bring in something different that was totally cool that we would just take and expand with. And that was probably my favorite time of the night, man, just listening to him and then being able to extrapolate from where he's going and take it to another place. And his singing, my God. And actually, when him and Alex Lidgerwood, when Brent and Alex Lidgerwood sang together, like Fantasy and that stuff. In fact, I'll tell you, I'll toot my horn for 1 second.
Do it. I know it's coming, and I do go ahead and hit it.
That idea that ended up going into the Grateful Dead of Dear Mr. Fantasy going into Hey Jude on the ride out.
1990?
No, it was Go Ahead.
No, I'm saying that's when the Dead introduced it, but it was spawned.
Well, I did that at rehearsal. That was my idea. And
Fantasy into Jude.
There you go. So that was my, I guess, contribution to the Grateful Dead.
Bootsy's tired, and just before we go, can you just play a couple of licks for the audience, inspire some peeps out? It was great to hang.
Let's see.
It's the Jake Feinberg Show.
There you go.
We'll see you later.